Welcome to From the VC's Bookshelf, a podcast from TBR, the College System of Tennessee, the state's largest higher education system. In this series, we examine how we might re-envision the work we do and how we work together as we move into a post-pandemic world. Please join our host, Dr. Heidi Lemming, Vice Chancellor for Student Success, as she leads a live discussion with industry experts and leaders throughout our system.
In our fall 2024 podcast series, I'm pulling from a selection of articles and books that showcase current topics in the full field of student success and student services. Interviews with the system and campus level staff who work in the specialty area connected to that article or book will serve as our panel experts. The central theme behind the fall series is about how various functional units housed under the student success umbrella are working across the TBR system to address the challenges and opportunities that are front and center as our institutions pursue the goal of increasing student success rates. This podcast, we're going to be featuring a publication by AACRAO, Implementation of the IMS Global Comprehensive Learner Record Standard, a practical guide for campus personnel. And I'm joined by three panelists today. I'll do a brief introduction of them and welcome each of you to this work on this podcast talking about the CLR, the Comprehensive Learner Record. First is Mark McConahay, currently serving as the Senior Consultant and Innovative Credential Coordinator for AACRAO. He previously worked for Indiana University as the Associate Registrar of Systems for several years before becoming the Associate Vice Provost and Registrar. Mark's history at IU includes leading the implementation of student records component with an ERP, the implementation of the electronic transcript, automated workflow for drop add and grade changes, the grade context record, and the automated course exchange, touchtone registration, degree audit, and others. Mark served as the program director for the AACRAO Technology, now the Technology and Transfer Conference from 2009 to 2016. He's also served on the AACRAO Board of Directors from 2017 to 2020 as the Vice President for Information Technology. Mark, thank you for sitting on this panel with me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for asking.
Second panelist is Tim Amyx. He's worked in higher education for over 20 years and is currently the Assistant Vice President for Strategic Enrollment Systems and College Registrar at Volunteer State Community College in Gallatin, Tennessee, just north of Nashville. Tim is a past president and former vice president for Information Technology and Publications for Tennessee AACRAO. Over the years, Tim has served on various AACRAO task forces and committees. He was the chair of the AACRAO Community College Issues Committee and the Group 5 coordinator for the annual meeting program committee and served as chair for the 2017 Minneapolis AACRAO annual meeting. Tim is one of the original faculty for the AACRAO Reg 201 workshop. He is a recipient of the Tennessee AACRAO Distinguished Service Award and the AACRAO Thomas Bilger, I said that right, Award. Tim recently served on the AACRAO Board of Directors as the Vice President at Large. You have quite an impressive resume there, Tim. Thanks for sitting with us today as well.
Thank you.
And the third panelist is Heather Brown. She serves as the Director of Operations for Student Success at the Tennessee Board of Regents. In her role, she works as the project manager for the Comprehensive Learner Record and assists in launching other student success technology projects to scale across the state. Ms. Brown has 8 years of experience in student success at TBR. She holds a master's degree from Tennessee Tech University in strategic leadership. Heather, excited to have your perspective on this panel today as well.
Thank you.
All right, so let's dive in. We've got this AACRAO publication that was released in 2019. So it's been a few years, but we've been working this entire time on launching a learner record here in Tennessee. And so it's, I think, appropriate for us to think about this publication as we define for our listeners a little bit more about the work that AACRAO has been doing in this space, but also Tennessee. And so first, I might ask Mark, maybe introduce our listeners to AACRAO as an organization, and then maybe have Tim weigh in on how AACRAO has been supporting you professionally in your role as a registrar. So Mark, you want to start?
Sure. Well, first of all, AACRAO is the American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers. And as the name sounds, we serve registrars, those who are professionals in the maintenance of student records, and admissions professionals. Primarily, that is, I hesitate to say this, but A lot of folks within AACRAO are in admissions, are those who maintain the record data set, the record repository. But I don't want to limit to that. We've also been part of enrollment management and actually really have a presence in that space as well. What do we do? Well, of course, we support the professions. Basically in the realm of learner success, student records and admissions. We also do research and scholarship. You may not know it, but there's a scholarship journal called College and University. We also do periodic surveys and do research on a periodic basis. We do provide for career pathways with both training and credentials associated with it. We have resources on our website. We do issue advocacy, and we do look forward. As a matter of fact, my interactions with PBR are through grants that AACRAO has garnered with various funders. But specifically, we were associated with helping support your implementation of the Comprehensive Learner Record. But also, in general, we seek funds for the advocacy of learning mobility and innovative credentials, which is how I'm here today.
That's great. Tim, from a professional perspective here, how is AACRAO added to your professional?
Sure. I guess the thing that I think of first is that AACRAO is really an indispensable resource for us in our area of the profession, because that's where we find all of our guidance on standards, recommendations on different implementations. Also has been a great group of professional colleagues to get to know, so that way you can expand your scope and your vision from outside of your part of the world. Mm-hmm. So lots of interaction there. But I think the big thing as purely as a professional is the fact that that's where we can go to find the answer to our questions. AACRAO specializes, especially I think about FERPA and their work in that space, but there's also a Registrars Guide, an Admissions Director's Guide. When I get asked a question on my campus that I don't know the exact answer to, or I need to actually show something written down, I can find that in an AACRAO publication or on the AACRAO website. And it's just an indispensable resource because AACRAO also is able to quickly react to government regulations and changes to give us guidance on and advice on how we should do implementations or make change on our campus when things are happening in a very dynamic way.
Yeah. So it's fitting that we've picked a publication that helped guide some of our early work when we think about launching a learner record in Tennessee. And so one of the things that we've learned throughout this process is a lot of people don't know what a learner record is. So Heather, you want to kind of describe for our listeners what we've been working on?
Yeah. So the basic definition of a comprehensive learner record is it's a digital document that provides a detailed and holistic view of a learner's achievements, skills, competencies, and learning experiences. So it provides just that holistic view of everything that the learner has done on their journey. And I'll let Mark and Tim get into a little bit more of how that differs from how we currently document information.
So yeah, it's different. Well, in some ways, I guess it could be considered similar to a transcript, but it's a little bit different, right? So weigh in a little bit more on that?
Sure. So I think the big thing is that people need to understand is that it is not a replacement for the traditional academic transcript. It's a supplement too. We talk a lot in the student affairs profession about how much learning takes place outside of the classroom, about those things that are not happening in a 3-hour time block during a week. So the comprehensive learner record, one of its functions is for us to be able to codify that and be able to display it to an employer or a transfer institution on the case of a community college. But it's also a little bit more than even that. It's not just about leadership opportunities or unique experiences that a student may have had outside the classroom. It also gives us an opportunity to expose the learning outcomes that happen inside the classroom and inside the academic program to help employers find an employee, a student, a graduate that's going to be a good fit for them because they now have a better understanding of what that student learned in our academic programs.
Yeah, that's great. And Mark, from a national perspective, I think it's interesting to hear a little bit more about what motivated the development of this learner record in the conversations that you've had maybe with other national partners.
And I guess where I would get that is that, this has a bit of history. we started looking at this, meaning AACRAO, in 2015, when we recognized that the traditional academic transcript really wasn't communicating the kinds of learning that, in fact, our learners had achieved, and that, in fact, we had the tools in order to provide that kind of information, that kind of detail. So first and foremost, simply a college degree was no longer rare. So what kind of college experiences could we place in front of a reviewer that would differentiate the individual? So that was part of it. There's a certain amount of scrutiny associated with higher education at the moment. I think we're all aware of that. And one of the things that we could do in order to alleviate some of that scrutiny is to be very transparent about what, in fact, the return on investment of college and higher education, easy for you guys to say, what that kind of return on investment is. So what kind of benefits can be derived from the degree? Well, you can answer that question when you enumerate the learning outcomes, when you can express skills and competencies in a way that can be reviewed ultimately by a third party. One of the things I'll say, and I'll get down into a little bit more of that too, but one of the things to say is, in spite of this scrutiny, if you look at the history of higher education and our ability to assert a credential, the trust factor of higher education credentials has always been high. And it's always been high because we have done the things within our organizations to basically say that this learning has value. We validate it, and when we assert it, you can trust, in fact, that the learner that's being enumerated here does, in fact, have those skills, has achieved what we've said. So we want to extend that to further detail. We want to add these kinds of learning outcomes and expressions of learning on behalf, maintaining the same level of trust that we always had. The last thing to say there, actually two other things to say. One is, the traditional transcript has been in this form since the late 1800s. In fact, when Edison invented the photograph, this was about the same time that we created a chronological ledger that represents the transcript. In 2023, we kind of still do the same thing, despite the fact that our technology platforms will support so much more. We are really advocating taking advantage and leveraging those technology platforms so that we can express the learning of our students so much better. And last but not least, I think we're all aware that there is high demand for labor out there. And there's high demand for labor for specialized skills, and they wish to review people and be able to differentiate them based on what they know. It's very, very difficult to determine for an employer what someone knows just based on a course title and a grade. If we can enumerate, if we can add detail, if we can express that in the exact same way with the exact same level of trust that we do with a transcript, everybody benefits. The institution, the learner, and the employer.
That's great. And I might add, for Tennessee in particular, the reason why I was early adopter of the idea of looking at the learner record was because in our system, we started now, 9 years ago, in coding high impact practices in our banner system. And those are the student experiences that may happen in the classroom, may happen outside the classroom, but those are the things that we know add value to not only the student better understanding the material, but giving them real life world experience that employers would value. And as a technical community college system, of course, we're highly attuned to meeting the needs of our employers and our workforce and trying to make sure that they understand those skills that our students are obtaining while they're with us. And so it seemed like a natural fit to kind of bring that high impact practice work and the coding that we did in Banner into this more robust conversation around a learner record. Plus, we're a system. So we're not just one institution. We can do this across multiple. And so one of the things, Heather, that I'd like for you to describe is just, again, that technological infrastructure that's needed. So we had those early conversations about how this all could be woven together from a data standpoint, but what are the infrastructure issues needed to support the implementation of a CLR?
Yeah, so I probably came into this project very naive and thinking you can just pull the data and stick it on there. And so I've learned a lot through this process. The first thing I've learned, and my new favorite word, is interoperability. If I even said that right, interoperability standards. You want to adopt the technical standards. One Ed Tech is the national organization that has the CLR open standards. And so that's what we follow, and that's what everyone else is following to make sure that these systems are working together, data is exchanged and is compatible across multiple systems. You also need a digital credentialing platform. We have one that with a company that we use. There are several out there that can take your data, your information, and help translate that language to put out a learner record that the learner can utilize and share. You want to make sure you've got a really good security measures, really good data security and privacy. Make sure you're following all those regulations, the encryptions, APIs and integration capabilities. We are pulling information out of Banner for high impact practices and student activities, but we also have to put that information in Banner. But we are also storing our program level outcomes in a separate registry called the Credential Registry from Credential Engine. And so we have to work with our vendor to help us kind of pull all of that information out to get it on that learner record so that the data is all correct for the student.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that the interfaces are user-friendly for students, mobile-friendly. Most of this happens where you're going to store your comprehensive learner record in a wallet on your phone so that you can send that information out and share it and exchange it with employers. So we want to make sure that that's mobile-friendly and user-friendly. And then just as we are starting to work on now, data analytics and reporting and how we will receive that information and utilize that information to improve our CLR.
Yeah, so lots of technical things there. So if you're not from that background, you might not have understood a lot of that, but you should have gotten from that message that there is a lot behind it other than just pulling data. Tim, one of the things that's going to be really important as we kind of launch the learner record statewide here, hopefully later this year, is that we have to ensure, again, the authentic nature and verifying that what an employer is getting from a student is in fact true. So in your role as a registrar, how do institutions make sure that that's meeting those standards?
I think one of the things as we talk about all this technical stuff that we have to remember is what Mark said earlier, and that's that we've been doing this for a long time. The registrars are responsible for ensuring all of those things. And so the comprehensive learner record is simply an updated version of what we've always done. And we can get really hung up in those technical things, but one of the specific purposes of the publication that we're talking about today is to help registrars bridge the gap between what they already do and all of the technical requirements. So to a certain extent, it's no different than producing a transcript in English and delivering it to a person. We've done that for 100 years on paper. Now we're going to do it electronically using all of those security measures, all of those things that we have to have in place in order to remain compliant. The student still is the owner of their record, but it's the college that's responsible for validating it and saying that it's true. We're just simply using a different method. We're collecting more data together, and we're giving the student a new way to release that data that we have verified already on our side. The student can now release that to an employer. So if we get hung up in the technical, like Heather was talking about, which we have to in order to make this happen, it can get very confusing. But the thing that I think everyone should take away is that at the core, it's still the same stuff. We have a record. We're responsible for making sure that that record is secure and accurate, and we're allowing the student to release that record to a person that they want to see it, that has an interest in seeing it.
Yeah, that's great. So all three of you, I would love to hear what you think are the key benefits of a learner record for students, particularly those who may not have completed a traditional degree. So, we think about, kind of the technical work that we do at our institutions. So I'll take volunteers here. Someone wants to jump out there. All right, Mark, you're getting pointed at.
Well, I think there are really all kinds of. The first and foremost reason for doing this is and I'll just piggyback on what Tim has already said, a credential is a credential. And what we're talking about here is in taking advantage of the information that we already have in our systems and that we already have in our governance structures at our institution, and expressing it on behalf of each of the individual students. But more than that, expressing it in a way that doesn't violate the chain of trust we've already established. So by the time the reviewer opens this with all of the additional metadata that we've been able to provide, they have trust in that assertion and can move forward appropriately. I think that's first and foremost. I think the second part of this is that we really do a service for the learner, not only in regard to what we express officially as a credential, but we have provided for them a very specific summary of their learning outcomes, the skills and competencies that they've attained over the course of their college career, whether they finished or not. In other words, we have given them the tools to articulate to a potential employer the kinds of things that they understand, they know, and have achieved, even if they haven't completed a full degree. So I think those things just go hand in hand. The other thing it can do, because we're going down another level of detail, is it can be used formatively, exactly like a degree audit program. If I have a specific career goal, and I have gone halfway in my pathway toward that career goal, where are my gaps and how do I fill those gaps? When we're down at this level, you can say, I need skills X, Y, and Z, and I can get Y and Z over here in this course. We can do those kinds of formative things. And now I'll piggyback on what Heather said. Because we're compliant with interoperability standards, we have raised the level where not only can we express and assert all these things with confidence, but the reviewers can intake all of those skills electronically, put them into their systems, and become more efficient in both identifying and screening the candidates that'll happen. By the way, I'll just add, one of the longstanding issues that many higher ed institutions in the United States have is this institution-to-institution credential exchange. In other words, course articulation. Imagine if everyone has adopted these interoperability standards and we take it that far, not only can you basically ingest the courses that you need to basically tell where this student fits into your curricular context, but you can do it very, very efficiently with a level of detail that previously never existed. So I think there are just a ton of benefits moving forward in this direction.
Yeah, Tim, how about you?
Yeah, so I'd like to take something that Mark said and build on it from a slightly different angle. If you've ever applied for a job, if you've looked at a list of job requirements, sometimes the job requires a degree, sometimes it doesn't. But oftentimes you'll see a list of skills or certain kinds of knowledge listed in that job description as something that the employer is looking for. Well, if that job doesn't require a degree, because your question was specific to that, what if I don't complete? But there are some preferred skills or required skills. The comprehensive learner record allows the student, the potential employee, to take that comprehensive learner record and show that to the employer saying, look, you didn't require a degree, but I actually have taken college level coursework that meets the requirements of these specific skills for this job. It's kind of like breaking things down. When we look at the comprehensive learner record, if you think about the degree itself as a summary of learning, and the courses within that is what makes up that degree, and then these learning outcomes and skill sets are what make up the courses. So we've never gone down in the public to this granular a level of what the student is actually learning. We've stopped at the course level. So now we're breaking that apart even further, allowing both the employer and the student to say, we're a good fit.
Yeah, and sometimes those courses, the titles, you have no idea what they may be studied in that course.
Well, and you also get a chance to look at some courses that you think might not be relevant, and you can see the relevance in them because the general public doesn't, and even the students that complete the courses don't always understand understand what they've actually learned, why this assignment was given to lead to a particular learning outcome in a course that we might not think is directly related.
Right, and highlight some of those high impact practices too that they engage in. Heather, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, I was going to say it gives the student something to show, even if they haven't completed that traditional path. We see a lot now, people are not completing traditional degrees. They're getting a lot of certifications and doing a lot of different stuff, but maybe not finishing a degree. So it allows you to showcase strengths in areas that also maybe don't reflect the degree that you received. I like to share that I graduated with an art degree in the middle of a recession, and no one knew what to do with that on my resume.
Yeah.
But if I could have shown the hurdles I had to cross, the intensity, the problem solving, the time management, the project management, the creativity that went into that program, it could have been a different story, and I could have started my career path possibly early. But I was derailed in a way because there just wasn't a way for me to properly articulate that. And so students now will have that opportunity to share what they can actually do.
Yeah.
I think Heather brings up a really good point. We focused a lot in this conversation about the academic transcript because we've been showing similarities and some contrasts. But if a person's applying for a leadership position, right now colleges don't have a way to expose all of the leadership opportunities and engagements that the students had in clubs, organizations, honor societies, student government. All of those things that are truly taking place outside of the classroom now can be exposed in a comprehensive learner record where they're not on the academic transcript, which adds to and supports exactly what you were saying, Heather, about the true value of the experience, not just the academic coursework.
Yeah. Mark, this has been a long journey for us with a lot of assistance from AACRAO and NASPA and other, like the Lumina Foundation. So can you talk a little bit about the partnerships with those organizations and how they're supporting the CLR initiative nationally?
Yeah. I think we sort of hit on it, particularly with Heather and Tim's comments right at the end. All of those organizations are interested in either advancing access to education and access to the labor workforce in meaningful ways. You mentioned Lumina, NASPA. There's also the Gates Foundation, Strata. All of these groups are also funding these efforts, with the ultimate goal of being able to not only advance the learner but also advance and enrich the labor workforce. And both of those go hand in hand. If we basically, in this case, a rising tide lifts all boats, if we have a better labor workforce and we have the ability to better match the candidates into the right positions, we have done not only a good job for the learner, but we've done a great job for those who need those learners. In other words, we've been able to fill those positions. When you look at these overall groups, that's really what they're after. They really want to enrich the learner and support them in their future endeavors. And they really want to support the overall economy of the United States. So I just think it's a good match. By the way, I would also say, you talked about what a long road it's been, what a long journey. In the last couple of years, particularly right now, sort of the future state, there's been a lot of discussion about a student's agency over the sets of credentials they have, and not only educational credentials, those that we're most concerned with, but also those emanating from other sources. Their labor history, their skills history. Maybe they've earned various kinds of credentials in other pathways. Being able to take a digital wallet and put those together, give them agency, let them curate it in such a way that they have the best possible case for an opportunity, this is really starting to take off. I feel like we're on an inflection point where, there are a few adopters at the moment, but I'm feeling this big surge that'll happen in the next year or two.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too. And, that leads me into the final question for the discussion is the future of the learner record. So you just alluded to that, Mark, but I'm just wondering what other thoughts folks have about the future of this work.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm seeing and passionate about is the ability to really dig in, not only to the contents of the courses, the learning outcomes, but then being able to use the technology to map those to, it's exactly what Mark was saying, to be able to map those to the requirements for the job. So at the point that we can take our learning outcomes and match them to job requirements, and then help our learners and our employers come together in a single place and find each other. I think that is really the power of this. Certainly the articulation of credit that Mark mentioned between institutions, that's important as we see our students being more and more mobile between institutions. But ultimately, the students are here to get a job. I mean, yeah, they're here to learn, but that's the motivation, right? So think about the ability to have an employer and a student connect in such a way that both of them are extremely satisfied. The student has learned what they need to satisfy the requirements for the employer. The employer has found a learner that has done those things and could potentially be someone that is there for a very long time because they've actually matched up correctly. And at a very granular level, it's a way that we're not leveraging our technology right now, but we have the opportunity to do so in the future, which, as Mark says, it's good for the learner, it's good for the employer, it's good for the economy, it's good for the country. It brings validity back to higher education at a different level that, as educators, we know is there, but is oftentimes hard to expose to the learner and the employer.
Any final thoughts, Mark, on the future?
Yeah, I'll just simply say I'm really excited about the future. I think this is exactly headed in the right direction. I also believe that there are various initiatives. I don't have time to explain it right now, but there's a whole set of initiatives called Skills Forward. There's skills-based hiring, and there is even state interoperability initiatives, one of which you folks are involved with, which I think bodes well for how this overall infrastructure, this public good infrastructure, is coming to pass. I'm really looking forward to the next year or two.
Yeah, and I'm excited, listeners. Hopefully this fall, soon, you'll be hearing more information about the launch of our learner record. We're gonna come up with something creative to call it. You know, we've got to brand everything, but we'll have some creative name for our learner record here in Tennessee, and we'll be getting out not only to share it with students, but getting employers to the table to learn more about what the learner record can do for their hiring practices, and also, again, how we're expressing the value of post-secondary degree or credential to the greater public through our learner record. So more to come in the coming months. Thank you all for sitting and talking with me some more today about this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a pleasure. Thanks for having it.
Thank you for listening to this edition of From the VC's Bookshelf, brought to you by TBR, the College System of Tennessee, powering the state's economy and changing the lives of thousands of graduates, starting successful careers each year. To learn more about upcoming book selections or to register to attend discussions live, visit tbr.edu/bookshelf.